Hi, I'm Craig Moody. The story you are about to hear is raw and often brutal. So is love. Welcome to the Prince of New York.
Chapter 5 Flesh and Blood. I was down in Miami on business when I first got word that the Don wanted to see me. I knew immediately that it had to do with the captain, his spying on me, and his recent suspicion that I was queer. I returned to New York and tried my best not to be bothered by it all, but inside, I was freaking the fuck out. I shit my brains out for days. I didn't sleep. I was a mess. I showed up to the meeting as raw as though I didn't have any skin at all. The captain sat silently while the Don spoke directly to me. It was one of the few times that this ever happened. I don't need to know specifics. I don't care about what you do on your own time, but I do care about unnecessary liability. Your involvement with this man, be it friendship or otherwise, places a cloud in the sky that I would rather not be there. Cut all contact with him. End the friendship today. This is an order directly from me. Failure to comply will result in far more serious consequences. I don't believe I need to detail that. I sat stunned and horrified. My worst nightmare, one I would rarely even contemplate or give any mental energy to, was happening and unfolding right before my eyes. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I simply nodded and left the room. I waited until nearly midnight before phoning Prince. "So, what are you going to do?" he asked once I had confessed everything. I didn't say a word. Finally, perhaps fearing I was being listened to or even that my phone was tapped, I whispered, "Let's just get out of all this. Let's move. Out of the country. They won't come for us if we are completely out of the bubble." Prince remained quiet for a while before simply saying, "That may be true for you, but that is not the case for me. I would be hunted no matter where I went. My destiny in all of this is different than yours. You know that." I did know that, but I was secretly hoping that Prince would still agree to run away with me. "So that means this has to be?" I asked, but stating it almost as a fact. Prince sighed before saying, "That is what it means." He hung up. I fell to my knees and wept like a baby. I kept to myself after that. The rest of 1975 passed by in a blur. I don't really remember anything. I know I started drinking more, a lot more. I would black out often. It might not have been the best way to go about things, but it got me through. It kept me from putting a bullet in my brain. The captain soon laid off of me. The Don never said another word to me about the order he gave. Things just settled down, the smoke cleared, and I was free to survive if I wanted to comply with all that was commanded of me. But my heart would not relent. I craved Prince. I desperately missed him. I had a void in my soul that only he could fill. I figured that feeling this way was only the case for me, but one day, around 7 in the morning, my phone rang with the voice of Prince breathing heavy on the other side of the line. "I can't keep this up," he confessed. "I can't live without you." My heart swelled and thawed. It was the first time in months where I felt alive. "It's the same for me," I whispered. We met later that afternoon somewhere in Queens. I took public transport to lower the risk of being tailed, although I was pretty certain I was no longer being followed by that point. Prince and I met in someone's apartment. I don't know whose it was. I assumed it belonged to one of the captains or soldiers, someone doing relatively well because the place was no dump. Prince and I made love and just held on to each other. We spent that entire day as though it would be our last together. "What are we going to do?" I remember asking at one point. Prince didn't answer. Later that evening, he dressed and walked out. I watched from the window as he got into the back of a waiting black Cadillac. I only discovered a week or so later that he had finally taken over for his father, and I only found out because his father, perhaps having foreseen the obvious, passed away just days after that day. Prince was now the boss of his family. He now had more power and influence than ever. He could do whatever he pleased when it came to his personal life, yet the very thing he wanted most was also the most forbidden. I didn't realize it at the time, but his becoming boss was truly the beginning of the end. Prince was now busier than ever, but this did not stop us from meeting several times a week. We continued to meet at the apartment in Queens. Prince told his driver it belonged to his Gumar. No questions were asked, but just to be safe, I arrived an hour or so before or after he did and entered the apartment through a back window that faced the alley. Accessing it was a bitch. I had to climb a rusted-out fire escape and then practically jump to a nearby ledge that I could then inch along before reaching the window. Thankfully, the apartment was only on the 3rd floor. Otherwise, this little Spider-Man routine of mine could have resulted in a cracked neck. I understood, during this time, that Prince needed me as a place of refuge and escape. Even when I could tell he was heavily burdened by the enormity of his position, I said nothing about it. I would distract him with various stories about gossip and rumor I had heard about mutual acquaintances and mob figures. This seemed to ease and relax Prince. We would always make love. It was always warm and passionate, even when Prince was not otherwise. He was meaner and colder than ever. Not to me, just his presence, his air. Something had shifted, but it was understandable. To be a mafia boss was to be a godlike figure. You had to appear immortal, larger than life, yet you had to remain stoic and humble in order to avoid being usurped, murdered, or arrested. Prince played this fine balancing game well. I was in awe of how easily he assumed the role of his father. Of course, people talk, and the soldiers and captains of my family spoke of the ascension of the new mob family boss. There was an element of reverence and respect afforded to Prince because of his father, but it was clear that he had a tone of charm, discipline, and intimidation to secure himself on the throne he had inherited. He was no flunky. His father would have never left the family seat to him had he not been certain Prince could handle the job. Life went on without much interruption for quite a while. I believe it was the spring of 1976 when I first heard something about Prince's younger brother attempting to kill his older brother, Prince, the head of the family. I had heard things for a while, but I never said a word to Prince. To my surprise, he himself brought it up one night as we lay in bed watching late-night television. "My fucking baby brother has it out for me," he said simply. "Can't believe it would ever come to this between us." I remember not saying a word. I felt he needed my silence during this moment. I was right. As the night drifted into early dawn, I was awakened by Prince moving out of the bed and moving toward the window. He lit a cigarette and stared out toward the vacant street below. I peered in the darkness at his naked body, his frame strong and stout. Every inch of him was purely beautiful. I found myself smiling as I realized all of him was mine. I no longer suspected him of being with anyone else. It wasn't said or confirmed, but I felt he was now exclusively mine. Prince moved from the window and toward the nightstand. He grabbed the phone receiver, dialed a number he clearly knew by heart, and said just one simple word: "Now." I had no idea what he meant by that, but I connected the dots later when I heard first from the streets and then from the local news that the youngest son of a recently deceased Mafia Don had been brutally murdered outside of a Newark deli. He had been stabbed 47 times. As far as the police knew, there were no witnesses. The crime disappeared from the headlines about 3 weeks later. Not a single word was ever said again, at least not by the New York media. The word on the street continued, and it was soon factually accepted that the older brother, now family boss, my prince, had ordered the elimination of his baby brother, an order I myself had witnessed being given while the prince stood naked at the bedside of the secret apartment that housed our queer affair. But no one was privy to the latter half of that fact except for me. On the street, Prince had now risen to a level of unanimously feared and revered family boss. The murder of his younger brother had not only secured his position on the throne of his family's mafia empire, but it also garnered him a fearsome, almost untouchable reputation that would serve to protect our secret life for years, but would also ultimately lead to its unfortunate undoing. My first time trying cocaine was pretty uneventful. I was at a card game with some of my fellow soldiers. The high rollers had cashed out and left for the night. We were playing for scraps, mostly just eating, smoking, and generally bullshitting. Someone pulled out some powder and the sniffing began. I didn't have any interest at first, but by the time the entire table had snorted the seemingly endless trail of white lines, I decided I didn't want to be left out. I sniffed and rode my first cocaine high like a champion. It didn't take long for me to begin craving the stuff. At first, I kept my consumption to social settings. Then it moved to afternoon bumps to get me through the rest of my day. Before I knew it, I was a full-blown cokehead, spending thousands per month on the best quality powder money could buy. Prince was unaware of my habit at first, until he caught me doing a line in the bathroom of the Queen's apartment. "You on that shit?" he simply asked, more as a remark than a question. "Nothing crazy," I replied, while wiping my nose and sniffing. "Just once in a while." Prince stared at me coldly and knowingly. He knew I was lying. "No one does that shit alone unless they're already hooked." He turned and walked out of the bathroom. I figured he had gone to the bedroom or kitchen, but I heard him close the front door and move down the nearby staircase and down to the ground floor. He left and didn't contact me again for nearly 2 weeks. When he did, he had one single command. "Stop with the junk or this is over," he said ominously. "I don't give a fuck about your reasons. They're all bullshit. Any junkie's reasoning for using is always bullshit." "I ain't a junkie," I fired back. Prince didn't say another word. He simply hung up. I was fucking pissed. I didn't stop sniffing. I started using more than ever. A week later, I had my first full-on knockdown fight with Prince. "I thought I told you to stop with this shit," he raged, holding a small plastic bag between his fingers. "Where'd you get that?" I asked, trying to play stupid. "In your fucking coat, motherfucker. I knew you wouldn't stop. Now you got me checking on you like some crazy jealous bitch." I stood to my feet and moved toward him. "That's because you are a crazy jealous bitch," I snapped. He decked me right in the mouth. Not too hard, but enough to make me stumble. "I ain't one of your captains, motherfucker," I fired. "You ain't a boss in here." Prince smirked and walked toward the bathroom. I heard the toilet flush. I knew he had just dumped my stash. I was mad, but not mad enough to do anything. I moved into the bedroom and plopped on top of the bed. "I don't like that shit," Prince said as he entered the room. "I've seen good men go off the deep end, lose it all. I don't want that sort of thing around me." I sat up, eyeing him carefully. "You're afraid I'll lose control of my mouth and expose us, isn't that it?" Prince didn't answer. He moved to the dresser and started to remove his clothes, intent on getting into his robe. "Maybe I should," I heard myself say. Perhaps I was losing my self-control after all. Maybe I'm tired of just being your secret fucking whore, only able to see you when you see fit, only able to spend time with you in this fucking apartment, a place neither one of us owns. We sit around here on some other man's furniture, fucking on his bed and eating his food. This ain't no way to live. I'm getting too old for this shit. I want something more. I want what we used to have. I want to live together again." Prince, now naked, wrapped his white terry cloth robe around his muscular body. The sight both aroused and annoyed me. "You know as well as I that living together is out of the question," he said lowly and without emotion. He moved to the nightstand and fetched a cigarette and lighter. "Well, then, maybe it's time to end all this," I continued, not meaning what I was saying. I just wanted a reaction. I wanted and needed to vent my discontent and pain. I was hurt. He knew it. He was as well, but he had the power to change things, despite the risks that would come with it. "You're high," he said, lighting the cigarette and moving toward the window. "Fuck you," I growled. "I ain't high. I ain't sniffed today." "Then you're drunk then," he said. "I'm just confused," I continued. I didn't say another word. I waited for him to react. "Confused about what?" he finally asked, but not turning away from the window to face me. "How you can just go on living knowing that you had your own fucking brother, your flesh and blood, murdered, also you could stay atop the family fucking throne." He didn't speak, but I could feel his energy shift. I had crossed the line and I knew it. He knew that I knew, which is why I believe he hesitated at first. Finally, he turned slowly, the cigarette dangling from his large lips. "I should have you fucking taken out for talking that way to me," he said with almost a snarl. I laughed. "You ain't my fucking Don," I spat. "I can say whatever the fuck I want." He lunged, landing on top of me, gripping a large hand around my neck. With his other hand, he pulled the cigarette from his lips and threw it across the room. "I'm still the fucking boss," he seethed, his face just an inch or so above mine. "You will respect me as such." I didn't take my eyes off his. I held his stare, boldly and defiantly. I silently dared him to go further. "Do you fucking understand?" he growled. I said not a word. I refused, but my eyes spoke volumes. He received the silent message and pulled away. He moved into the kitchen to make himself a drink. I grabbed my coat and keys and walked out of the apartment. We didn't speak again for 6 weeks after that.